What is up, movie friends? Welcome back to Raiders of the Lost podcast. I'm Anthony.
And this is James, and today we're going to be doing an episode on The Truman Show, which came out in 1998, directed by Peter Weir, written by Andrew Niccol, starring Jim Carrey, Laura Linney, Ed Harris, and Noah Emmerich. An insurance salesman discovers his whole life is actually a reality TV show. The best way you can support our show is to go to patreon.com/Raiders of the Lost podcast and become a patron. Patrons get special perks like personalized messages, personalized videos, upcoming podcast schedules, and top-tier patrons get a shout-out on the podcast once a month. Head on over to our new website, Raiders of the Lost Podcast, to check out all of our merch, our apparel, our custom movie posters, find all of our content, all of our social media. Contact us. You can also become a patron there.
The Truman Show is an amazing movie, and I think it's very underrated. And if you look at IMDb, I think it has an 8.1 rating, which is extremely high for a movie. It's rare for any movie to get over 8.0, so this is a testament that people adore this movie. It also has almost 1 million reviews on IMDb. And this film showcased Jim Carrey's talent because he was known as a comedian up until this point. And yes, he was dominating the 90s, but he was just playing silly characters and using his strength in comedy to find success. And then this showed a new side to Jim Carrey that no one had ever seen within him.
Yeah, it's a million ratings, not reviews. Someone's going to be like, it's actually ratings, so he's going to fix that for you. But it's ranked 167 on IMDb's Best Films of All Time user list, which is incredible. And Andrew Niccol wrote a fantastic script. He's known for Gattaca. He did Lord of War also, and he directed both of those films. And if Good Will Hunting never came out the same year, it definitely would have won Best Original Screenplay because it's absolutely phenomenal, just the concept itself. And the film got 3 Oscar nominations, including Best Original Screenplay, Best Supporting Actor for Ed Harris, and Best Director. And it's a damn shame. I mean, Ed Harris is terrific in this movie, but Jim Carrey's on a different level, and he didn't even get a nomination for it.
Yeah, and this was also directed by Peter Weir, who's a fantastic director. He made Master and Commander. He did Dead Poets Society, and he also did Witness with Harrison Ford. So he's made a bunch of really fantastic films. Most people probably don't know him by name, but he is a phenomenal filmmaker who's made amazing films. And he and Carrey collaborated on this project. And Jim Carrey was someone who, at this point in his career, he still had a lot of control because he was the biggest star in Hollywood, and he was very big on improvisation. Peter Weir isn't really big on improvisation, so they had to kind of butt heads for a while. And then eventually, when Peter Weir saw his genius on display, he allowed Carrey to improvise so much. So a lot of what Truman does in this movie, yes, it's written in the script, but there's so much that Carrey brought to the screen that wasn't on the page because of how great of an actor and performer he is.
He's a genius. And I just want to shout out the music composer of this film. The music is incredible, and it complements the character of Truman so well, and the pain he goes through, the trauma throughout the course of the film, then the uplifting moments and his discovery of the truth. And I think that the music is one of the most underrated parts of the film, but the concept itself, it's just so fascinating. And I'm sure we've all imagined that we're like the main player in a simulation, like everyone in the world's watching us, or in the film, it makes you really question your reality. It's very similar to The Matrix. Is everyone around me fake? Is this all a simulation? Is this all done on purpose? And I love the main themes of this film, and a lot of it is God and fate and reality and trauma also. And so I think it's a very deep film after you watch it a few times and understand the core elements that the filmmakers are trying to express.
And this film, it showed it was a precursor to the rise of reality television, because at this point, reality television was still mostly game shows, and The Real World had come out in the early 90s before this.
What about Big Brother?
Big Brother came out in 99 in a different country. It came out in 2000 in America. But Real World started in 92 on MTV, so that was the first real foray into reality TV for America.
Mad Real.
That wasn't a game show. And this movie was ahead of its time in terms of showing people's fascination with reality TV. And it's a question of why are people so intrigued with it, because reality TV has overtaken most of cable, and between Netflix and Amazon and every cable network, everyone has a reality TV show, and there's more than you can count, and there are different reality TV shows for whatever interests you have. That's how many there are. And there's just something different about reality versus narrative fiction storytelling that people just seem to be fascinated by. And this film questions that and shows that intrigue. And there's just something about reality TV that shows people love watching behavior. They like watching people just be nothing in terms of story or plot, and people are gravitating to this more and more each year.
And the irony with reality TV is so much of it is staged and fabricated and planned to happen, much like Truman's entire life and his entire storyline. Because, you watch these reality shows, and obviously the producers are in the back planning these situations, like, have that person do this. We're going to plan this kind of event for this situation. So it's, in a way, similar to how they describe it in the film. His best friend in the film, played by Noah Emmerich, Marlon, he says in his early interview, like the interview of the cast before the movie really starts, he's like, everything in the show isn't fake, it's just controlled.
Even to the extent where reality TV shows, even when they are real, like people are having actual conversations and interactions, you have to imagine the producers and crew are like, okay, you stand there and let's just put a light right there. So there's even if something is realistic, there is an eventful staging of whatever it is. You know what I mean? So things are put in place to depict these things. You can even say that TikTok is an extension of reality TV, and social media is an extension of reality TV, where just how in this film, Christoph is using the show to broadcast to the world this reality of Truman's life. With social media, everyone broadcasts their own reality to the world, whether it be posting Instagram stories or making TikTok videos or Snapchats. You're essentially broadcasting to the world your reality.
In a way, yeah. So we all kind of, or a lot of people became Truman in the Truman Show to an extent. Obviously, they're not being broadcast to 2 billion people 24/7 for over 10,000 days, but a lot of people are putting themselves out there on a daily basis in terms of content. I mean, we do that too. And I want to stay on reality for a little bit. One of the great concepts of the film is there a difference between a manufactured reality and a real one if you can't tell the difference? In the course of the film, we learn from Christoph, the basically godlike figure who created this world for Truman. He's in charge of the show. He's manufactured this world that to Truman is real, and everything about it is real. And that's one of the reasons why he says he never really questions it until towards the end of this, towards day 10,000 and on, when things start to happen. He's never questioned his reality, because if that's all you were presented with, you would accept it. And so Truman has accepted this fake reality, despite it being so odd in a way when we watch it from the outside.
And they're really great with how they present this to the audience, because it's not like the show is a twist in the story. We're shown that it's a show in the opening of the film, where they staged this great documentary style introduction of the film with these even fake credits for the actors who are portraying the other cast members on the show. And it's the talking heads interviews with like Meryl and Marlon and Christoph. And so they set up the world for us very quickly and established what it was, but they still left a lot of it up in the air. And Peter Weir and Nichols slowly rolled out how the show, what is created, how it's filmed, how it's edited. And to an extent, for the first act of the film, we're watching what audiences at home are watching for the most part.
Yeah, because within, I think it's about the hour mark, 60 minutes in, the entire veil is lifted from the show, from Truman's reality, and we get like the trailer or the commercial, the opening of the actual show. 1.7 billion people watched when he was born. It's across 220 countries. And now we truly understand the extent of how many people around the world are watching him, despite we get little glimpses of people watching the show before that happens. But now we understand it's the biggest show on earth, and everybody's been watching Truman since he was born.
The first time you ever see audience members is those 2 security guards at like a parking lot inside of like their little office. And it was after Meryl and Truman are being intimate in bed together, and the security guard jokes that, oh, they never show anything. There's just like a curtain will blow in the wind, and that's it. And so it was like a joke how they showed us the audience for the first time.
Yeah, and then also they bookend the film with those 2 guys, and they go, once the show's over, once Truman leaves, they're like, in the broadcast is cut, they're like, oh, what else is on? And then the movie ends.
Yeah, check TV Guide.
And it's really fascinating. And then let's talk about Jim Carrey for a little bit, because he plays Truman Burbank, and one of his best roles easily, and his name is an obvious connection to film and TV studios in Burbank, California, that so many shows and movies are shot on, but also the name Truman obviously directly means true man, is this real person in this fake world. And you can honestly expect or believe that Jim Carrey was already prepared for this role, because he was such a famous person in the 90s. I mean, we've talked about his run in the early to mid 90s, how insane those movies were, Ace Ventura and The Mask, and how on top of the world he had been at the time. And so he's already been dealing with constant paparazzi and people watching him in real life in general.
Yeah, so you can imagine he was perfect for this role, and also he adds the humor, which and so much charisma and natural levity that so few actors can show on screen. For example, like those scenes with him playing with the reflection and drawing little things with the bar of soap, that was completely improvised by him, and it became iconic moments of the film. Truman is a fascinating character because he's someone who he seems like he's a good guy and tries to do the right thing. And he's very innocent, naive, and the reason why he's so innocent and naive is because he's never really experienced an authentic life, because everything around him essentially has been controlled, and his life has been completely manipulated to follow a storyline, essentially. And so, even though he does have control over his thoughts and, for the most part, what he does and says, he ultimately doesn't even have control over the outcome and path of his life.
Yeah, and Jim Carrey's performance, it's so subtle and so nuanced. Like, you got to watch this a few times and just watch his performance, because this role, it's incredibly unique. There's never been a type of person like this that's ever existed in the history of the world, in the history of fictional literature or filmmaking or TV shows, really. And how do you play that kind of character? A person whose life has been completely staged since the day he was born, shaped and manipulated to fit this predetermined fictional storyline of their life. And there's never been a character like this. And so, fake friends, fake family, fake world, what would their personality really be like? And would they be normal? How would they be socially? I think that's why Truman's a bit goofy and silly, because he spent his entire life being expected by everyone around him in this fake world to sort of entertain them, or they all are they welcome everything he does in a way, and they're trying to watch what he does next in a way. And so everyone's responded to him in positive ways.
In terms of the audience?
No, in terms of the fake characters in the world.
Yeah, so, and the reason for that is because he's being manipulated by the entire set. And I think there are 4 different ways that Christoph and the production team, 4 different ways that they manipulate him. And it's control, intervention, encouragement, and fear. And so in terms of control, they control who Truman interacts with. Like, they force Meryl on him. They get rid of Sylvia when they start have like a romance blossoming, and they get rid of his father to create the fear. And then also in terms of intervention, they'll prevent Truman from doing things he wants to do, like trying to leave the island at first, but then becoming afraid of it, scaring him when he goes near the ferry with that boat that's half underwater, and like when he's trying to go to Chicago, having the bus driver kill the transmission of the bus itself, and the traffic stop when he and Meryl are trying to drive away from the town. And then also encouragement is used where the characters try to persuade Truman to stay in Sea Haven, like Marlon telling him that his job's great, he's lucky he has a desk job, and when Truman says he wants to leave, Marlon's like, where would you want to go? There's nowhere else to go besides Sea Haven. This is the best place to live. And then like that TV movies is about like the comforts of home and how it's best to stay close to home in a small town. And then they finally use fear to keep Truman grounded by creating the fear of his fear of the open water. The travel agency is filled with posters that are like terrifying, like a plane getting struck by lightning and stuff, and like giant wildfires, and news stories like on the newspaper and on television and the radio always promote danger. And so they use these 4 tactics to keep Truman manipulated and on the island.
Yeah, just to stay on fear. And also I think trauma ties into that same theme. The producers and actors, in a way, they don't believe what they're doing is bad, and they call it a noble life in the film, and they want to give their best performance. You know, they justify it in a way, but like these people just completely lack morality, and they don't even think twice about the trauma that they're inflicting in Truman's life, like the manufactured drowning of his father at sea, what that does to a person, and how it's created this intense fear of water and intense fear of leaving Sea Haven. Also the scene where they show the vicious dog barking at him when he's trying to cross to go to the ferry, not to mention the psychological deterioration of his mind that could easily happen to this person if he ever discovers the truth. And they even, like you said, test his ability to leave Sea Haven when they give him that job that's out in a different island, so he has to take the ferry. But I think they do this as a way to test that trauma that he has, if it still works in terms of holding him back and not wanting him to leave the island, and does he still have the fear from water, the fear from the incident with his father as a child when he drowned. And I think this is a really important psychological trick that the producers of The Truman Show have done, because they've really actually created trauma in somebody's life with a fictional event.
And a lot of people could point that out as being a plot hole. Like, what if he did get on the ferry and try to leave? But obviously, since they have total control over everything, even the weather, even if Truman does get on that ferry one day to test it out, they could just like have the ferry sink or have a huge storm turn them around. So there's no risk involved for them by encouraging him to leave, like that's like his coworker, by trying to get him to leave and saying even his job depends on it if he doesn't get this sail, and then seeing what his reaction is to approaching the ferries and the docks. And so there's really no risk, because even if he does, they can have him turn around.
It's like a psychological safe haven for the producers of the film. But also, Christoph explains when he's on the phone call with Sylvia about halfway through the film, during that interview on TV, that he says if Truman really truly wanted to discover the truth, he could do it and they couldn't stop him, which obviously eventually happens throughout the film. But also, I think before we talk about that, one of the main themes of the film also is fate, and this concept of Truman having minimal control and direction of his life, like you talked about. I think that ties in with fate and God and fatalism. Are our lives predetermined? Are we just passengers along for this journey? Truman's fate is clearly chosen and selected to fit his narrative that the producers want. He's never been in control of his life. Are we all like that? Are we all part of this predetermined plan with the illusion of free will? And I think the ending of the film shows that both are false beliefs, because Truman eventually rejects his reality and diverts from the fate of the show once he discovers the truth.
I think another major theme on top of fate is the idea of escape and escapism. There are all sorts of escapes that we can take in life, and it could be like watching a movie or playing a video game, or like most short-term pleasures are escapes from reality. And Nicole and Peter Weir were so ahead of their time in showing the almost addiction that people, in terms of the audience in the film, have towards being plugged in to Truman's life on a regular basis 24/7. Like, for example, like that man who's always watching in the tub and he falls asleep, and all the different characters who are audience members.
Two old women with the Truman pillow.
Yeah, the pillow, and even people in the restaurant at the bar are watching. Like, it showed that people, they gravitate towards trying to escape reality by focusing on something else, like a television program, like nowadays social media. And I think that they were really accurate with the depiction of how, like, before smartphones, and there was never you can never just watch television or anything 24/7. Like, you had to, like,
A program, you mean?
yeah, a program. You had to go to work, you had to do things, you had to go to the store. But now,
I mean, you could technically watch the weather 24/7.
yeah, wait, at the grocery store. But now we have a smartphone, and we can watch things, listen to things endlessly without a break. You could constantly be watching something, even while you're doing tasks, and even when you've left the house. And I think that this show showed that a lot of people would gravitate towards that mindless, constant distraction and escapism.
And it's really telling, I think, for humanity in a way, that there's just a small minority of people in this world in the film that are rejecting this program and want Truman freed, and they consider he's trapped in a prison, because he really is trapped in a prison, that he really, a psychological prison, a fake world. And that's where Lauren, whose real name in the film is Sylvia, she was an extra on the show, that, you know, we have the love at first sight situation, and they run off together, and she tries to explain to him what's going on. But how do you tell somebody that their world is fake? I mean, it's like Inception. Like, how do you say the world you live in is not real? It's really intense. I'm sure it's almost impossible for someone to accept that just from a 3-minute conversation. And so
it's not like they stole him. Like, he was born as part of the corporation's program.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about that is, the only reason why Truman was chosen was because of all the babies that were being born from adoption from parents that didn't want them anymore. His was the perfect timing for the show of when they wanted to start the program. So it was really just a coincidence of him being born at that correct time. It could have been any of those other unwanted childs. But Lauren, Sylvia, she's like one of the only people in the show that actually cares about Truman, and she's just an extra. That's why she doesn't get to develop a relationship with Truman. She's not supposed to be part of the narrative, and that's when we see Meryl gets thrown into the mix when he's at the band in college. And then I love how Lauren is wearing that button, how it's going to end, and that probably is part of like this underground movement of freeing Truman from this reality, this fake world. And that's probably a subtle but enormous theme of Truman's life, the Truman Show. How long can they keep it going? What is going to happen when it does end? You can't keep someone mentally trapped like this for so long. And then we have Truman recreating that photo of Lauren to try to keep that memory of her intact.
And the reason for that is because Lauren is the only real thing that ever happened to him.
Sylvia, really, though.
Sylvia. Sylvia was the only real thing that ever happened to Truman his entire life. Everything was staged or controlled or meant to happen or manipulated to happen. And their romance spawned naturally, and it was unplanned. And so I think that's why he is unable to ever forget her. And that's why he's also motivated to escape to try and find her, because it's the only real thing that he's ever experienced, even though he doesn't know that.
Yeah.
But deep down, part of him feels that.
Yeah, he wants to go to Fiji. We always are wondering, why does he want to go to Fiji? And we think it's because it's the furthest place in the world from Sea Haven. That's where he shows them the golf ball to Marlon. Sorry, all the characters actually, their names are actually famous actors. Marlon Brando, Meryl Streep. So that's actually a fun fact. But so he's talking to Marlon on the little golf ball. He's like, how Sea Haven and Fiji's on the exact opposite side of the world. He says that you can't get further away by going forwards or backwards from it on Earth. And the reason why he chooses Fiji, we find out, is because when the producers send in the fake actor that says it's Lauren or Sylvia's father, says that she has schizophrenia and they're moving to Fiji, and now he has this obsession to go to Fiji and find Lauren, aka Sylvia, again.
And I like how you mentioned that he is trapped, and especially the people who are part of the organization that Sylvia is a part of, and who protest against the show and want to try and get it and put an end to it. Christoph, the creator of the show, he feels quite the opposite. He doesn't feel as though Truman has been trapped there. The reason why Christoph created the show in the first place, he alludes to, is the fact that he views the world as a bad place filled with like sin and death, and he thinks it's the world has become a horrible place to grow up in. And so Christoph created the Truman Show's world, Sea Haven, as a utopian society that he has control of, where Truman doesn't have to experience pain, and he can live in comfort and live in peace. And so Christoph thinks that he is giving Truman a beautiful, idyllic life, and that's why he has such a different opinion and doesn't feel any guilt or regret for what he's been doing.
Yeah, and that conversation that he has with Sylvia when she calls into the interview, and he basically justifies everything he does because Truman has really no pain, and he's in the safest, most perfect world that could exist. And I think Christoph thinks he's a god, or he essentially is a godlike figure in the film to Truman. He for sure fancies himself when he's constantly talking about the world that he created for Truman. It's obviously like kind of a metaphor for the Garden of Eden. And then he even, at times, he seems to act like a father to Truman in a way, watching from a distance, caressing Truman's face on that large screen while he sleeps. And it's obviously similar to the possibility of God to humans. We don't truly understand their existence outside of belief, so we're in a prominent way ignorant to the existence of a godlike figure, if there is one. And
they even do that shot at the end when Truman's about to go. He's on the top of the staircase, and when he's speaking to Christoph, the way Peter Weir shoots it, where he has Truman shot, and then he cuts to the sun behind the clouds as it's like a godlike image with Christoph's voice coming from there. So he's alluding to the idea that Christoph feels like he is a god.
Yeah, I see that theme of God every time I watch this film. Like, whether you believe in religion or a higher power or not, you can't deny the truth that we've all had these questions in our head about life and existence. Is there a God? Did God create this world for us? And I think most fascinating of all, what would it be like to talk to God if God actually called out to us and we answered back? And that's kind of the interaction that happens at the end of the film.
And also, this movie brings a lot of questions of ethical behavior into the mix in terms of the cast and production itself, especially considering Truman's family and close friends, the couple who play his parents, Marlon. These are all actors who are there performing. And it brings into question how ethical is what they're doing in terms of manipulating this person. And the most ethical question, I think, would be Meryl's character, his wife, who basically is essentially, if you look at it, she's prostituted to Truman. She's literally hired to have intimate and sexual relationship with Truman. So in a way, the production prostituted her to him. Although, yes, they end up getting married, but essentially, she was there for that specific reason, which is highly unethical if you look at it that way.
And then to keep going on that, Christoph's one of his main motivations and main goals with the show is to have the first on-air conception. And so that's where Meryl ties in. That's where the new love interest comes in later on. So he wants to have the first baby made on camera and then born again on television. I think, again, this relates to him thinking he's a god and wanting to be a godlike figure.
The biggest ethical question is the idea of freedom. Truman is free to a certain extent within this bubble, but otherwise he doesn't have freedom. And Christoph thinks that he's created a comfortable home for him, but in reality, he's taken away Truman's freedom because Truman hasn't been able to become a real version of himself because of the manipulation that he's constantly lived through. And so he doesn't have real freedom.
Again, that ties into fate. Are we all on this like one path, but we can divert and get like pizza for dinner tonight instead of what our fate said we were going to get Chinese food or something like that. So that's kind of like the Truman reality. And again, to stay on Christoph for a little bit, and the morality of what he does is, again, like a godlike figure. He's ready to stand by and watch whatever happens to Truman happen, whether it results in his death or not. And Christoph and his army of actors and crew, they set out on a daily mission for over 10,000 days to ensure Truman never discovers the truth. And Christoph will go to almost any length to prevent Truman from finding the truth and almost drowns him at the end of the film. And he even says when the producers of the show are telling him that they can't kill the person on TV, they can't do that on live television, everyone's watching, Christoph says, why not? He was born on TV, so he'll do anything to Truman that will appease the audience and appease the narrative.
This episode is sponsored by movieposters.com. Use our coupon code Raiders15 to get 15% off your order today. If you're checking out our podcast online, especially on YouTube, you can see that our set is decked out with these amazing posters from movieposters.com. This is high quality printing. Movieposters.com has pretty much every movie imaginable. They can handle any kind of size, framing, backlighting, whatever you want for your movie poster. If you have a passion and a love for movies and television, there's no better way to express that love than by decorating your place with movie posters. Head on over to movieposters.com and use our coupon code Raiders15 to get 50% off your order today. Also, head on over to our website, www.raidersoftheLostPodcast.com. On that, we have a tab showing our custom-made movie posters, which this company is selling on their website. So head on over to our site to check that out as well. And I think it's endlessly fascinating to think of the scale and size of the production itself. And Peter Weir did such a brilliant job of cleverly hiding the production in terms of, especially like the cameras. Like you don't notice it when you watch it for the first time, but on second and repeat viewings, you'll notice in the first act of the movie that there are camera lenses hidden everywhere, whether it be on the trash can of his neighbor or on the fence posts or on walls and on buildings. And you'll see these black lenses. And the first time you see it, that goes right over your head. But upon repeat viewings, you just see them everywhere. And it's an amazing Easter egg hunt within the entire film. And on top of that, Peter Weir shows a lot of the audience's POV by using fisheye lenses to film many of the scenes and interactions with Truman and the other characters, showing that this is all staged and filmed with these lenses that are hidden, and they're fisheye lenses because they have to be hidden in like on a flat surface, so they can't have like a big lens on it, and
they're tiny.
Yeah, and they're really small. So I love that aspect of the filmmaking of this movie.
Yeah, and Peter Baizu, he was a cinematographer on the film, and they did a phenomenal job just combining cinematic shots with these reality TV type shots, these hidden camera shots, these micro camera shots, and then cutting to the random viewers around the world with those POV shots. And Peter Weir and Baizu, they filmed in a 1:6:1 ratio to make it feel more like a television show. But that only is present in the DVD release. The theatrical cut was cropped to 1:8:1, and the Blu-ray release was cropped to 1:78:1 to make it feel more like a film rather than a television show. And the overall look of the film, it's influenced by television shows, commercials especially. Like, obviously we have so many product placements done on purpose because the Truman Show makes its money off product placements and ad revenue. So that's why it's all over the place. And that's why those twins throw him up on that poster every day. His wife is always advertising Mococo cocoa, hot cocoa powder, and all sorts of things in the house.
And that's also why the whole movie is brightly lit. So if you watch the film, other than exterior shots, all the interiors, whether it be in cars or inside buildings, the offices or the homes, it's always very brightly lit. And they did this on purpose because the show itself would want everything to be as visible as possible because they're advertisers that they're promoting in the show itself. So that's why all the scenes are so brightly lit.
And I think Laura Linney is phenomenal in this film. She's terrific in everything she's ever done, but she's such a great character because she's playing really two roles in this movie, where she's playing Hannah Gill, the real actor, the real person, and then Meryl Burbank, the character of Truman Burbank's wife. And she has this great line in that opening interview of her as Hannah Gill, where she says, "There's no difference between a private life and a public life. My life is the Truman Show." And she calls it, again, an honorable profession to have. And Laura Linney does a phenomenal job, like playing these subtle acting but not acting expressions in body language movements while she's like talking to Truman alone in their house. You can see her or other characters as well. They're watching Truman as actors acting, and they're also actors in real life, obviously. But then you see like the subtle eye movements of, oh, maybe their eyes go wide while Truman's not looking at them, and they're like in their head, like, is he believing what I'm saying right now? So she just has this great nuanced performance.
There's a great moment of the eye thing you just mentioned with his mother when he goes to his mother, talking about how he saw his father in the town square, and she goes on a little she has a few lines of dialogue, and then she does like this side eye thing, like I hope you believe that. So characters are always doing that, and Laura Linney, her character Meryl, and Marlon essentially are the two closest people to Truman in his life, and they're essentially there, yes, to play their parts, but they're also there to help control Truman in a lot of ways and to help keep him under the facade of the show and to keep him from straying too far away from the idyllic paradise that he thinks Sea Haven is. So, for example, Marlon is always telling him how great it is here, and there's no reason to want to leave, and how great his job is, and Meryl does the same thing. And so they're there to kind of keep Truman in line as well. So the production needed two people to be on either side of him to keep him in line with what they needed Truman to do and say.
Yeah, and the film gets intense when Truman starts to see these cracks in his reality, in this facade. And actually, the first things start happening right away, these catalysts. And there's a great list of catalysts, like the light falls from the sky in the first morning we see him leaving his house, and Truman recognizing his dad, the actor who snuck on set to get back onto the Truman Show, and that rain production error where it falls just on him in one spot on the beach. And then he's in on the radio frequency by accident of the production TV and crew. And again, like you said, Meryl and Marlon are really the main players in trying to keep this facade hidden from him. And he really actually fully starts to crack when he sees the people behind him in the rearview mirror with Meryl in the car with him. And then he's driving with Meryl, and he does the fake roundabout going back home, and he shows that the traffic is all staged and synchronized. And then it gets to the point where he wants to escape Sea Haven. He wants to go over the bridge, but he can't even drive over water. And Meryl's even like, "Oh, honey, don't forget. Don't you remember you're afraid to drive over water? Let's just go home." And what he does to escape his fear, because again, this is a very brilliant piece of writing where he's starting to realize his reality is fake, but he still has this deep built-in trauma and fear that's real. That is real to him, even though it's manufactured in a way from his past. But he still has this intense fear that he still can't overcome. And so he closes his eyes, hits the gas, and puts Meryl's hands on the steering wheel to drive across the bridge.
Yeah, it's a great moment. And this shows that the Truman Show itself has fail-safes for extreme circumstances regarding Truman's escape and desire to leave. And so obviously they have the storm and being able to create weather on the water. And then for him to escape by land, they have this extraordinary circumstance of a nuclear facility blowing and it being dangerous to be outside, and that's how he's captured. And so Christoph has installed these fail-safes within the world to prevent Truman, even though he wants so badly to leave, to eventually stop him from leaving. So that shows exactly that he isn't free and he doesn't have control of his life at all, because even when he does try to leave, they stop him over and over again.
Yeah, and again, one of my favorite parts of the film, I think, and it's so telling, is that conversation between Sylvia and Christoph. And Christoph is explaining to Sylvia that the real world is sicker than his world. And if Truman was absolutely determined to leave, he could. But Christoph says that Truman prefers his cell. He prefers his prison. And then after this interview, though, that's when Truman escapes. This is where he fakes that he's going back to normal and he's living his normal life. But really, at this point, Truman has rejected his reality fully. He doesn't know the extent of what's going on. He knows there's a grand conspiracy, of course. I don't think he realizes that there are 5,000 cameras on the island. Obviously, he can assume there's some because he does that staged thing in the basement to pretend like he's sleeping to escape. But Truman rejects his reality, and this leads to him escaping, and Christoph panics, and he's putting the entire show in jeopardy just to find Truman.
And he also believes that he can control Truman so much and knows more about Truman than Truman does, that he thinks that creating the violent storm on the water will make Truman turn back out of fear. And Truman says this line later in the film when them two are sharing dialogue, that he says, "You were never in my head. You never had a camera in my head." And so ultimately that's Christoph's hubris of thinking that he could manipulate Truman to the extent of knowing what he's thinking. And he never understood that Truman had his own thoughts to himself, and he's his own person, and that's why he's eventually able to escape and overcome that storm.
Yeah, and then when he crashes into the wall, it's just really incredible filmmaking, and visually we've never really seen anything like it. And I'm sure a lot of flat earthers were like, "I told you, there's a wall there."
What do flat earthers think the water goes?
They think there's just a giant ice wall. I don't know.
An ice wall?
Yeah, just an ice wall around the entire... Anyways, we're not going to get into flat earth right now. Sorry if you believe in that, but,
I'm just curious what they think water goes.
But again, this is where he crashes into the wall. We have him walking up those steps that are painted to look like the sky and blend in. And he has the conversation with Christoph. And again, this is like God talking to you, and you're having a discourse with your creator, the creator of your reality in a way. And this is when Christoph tells him that you're on TV, say something, you're live to the entire world. And I think this is the first time Truman really understands, okay, this is a TV show.
It's an act.
And everyone's watching me in the world. Because I don't think he understood the extent of what it was really, but he knew his world was fake. And Truman refuses to give Christoph this finale that he wants. I think Christoph wants something grand from Truman, a grand gesture or a great dialogue or a great monologue for Truman. But what Truman does is he gives him that catchphrase, the good afternoon, good evening, good night. And I think that's Truman just giving a big middle finger to Christoph at the end of the film, being like, you don't control me, you don't control my life, and I'm going to ruin the end of your show.
And also, he understood that the entire thing was a performance. Even though he didn't know he was performing, he essentially was performing for the world. And so I think that he gives that bow at the end by saying this is the curtain call and the show is over. And it's a great scene because it is about Truman overcoming his fear and overcoming his boundaries and escaping and finding freedom for the first time. And I always, whenever I see this movie, I'm so curious about what happens to Truman when he enters the real world and what the world's reaction to seeing him would be like, and what choices he would make as a real person.
Honestly, I don't see this as a happy ending to the film. I see it as like a tragic ending, and this tragic character, because after Truman escapes, we can assume that his psychological makeup is going to be completely destroyed. I mean, how could he ever trust anyone or anything in the rest of his life? And I love to think, like you just said, what's it going to be like when he leaves and he enters the real world? How would he react to everyone? And I completely believe that he'll have serious emotional trauma, develop probably extreme paranoia and anxiety, that he's being watched everywhere he goes. Because, I mean, if you think about it, he was already, and now probably even worse because he knows he was being watched. Now he'll probably develop schizophrenia, I think. And because he's the most famous person on the planet, probably the most influential, famous person besides Jesus Christ himself in terms of popularity, and paparazzi and random people will be following him and filming him everywhere. So even though he didn't really know about all the 5,000 hidden cameras, he'll have 5,000 public cameras pointing at him everywhere he goes. So I think that it's probably a tragic ending to his life after he leaves Sea Haven.
Yeah, that could be a reason why Christoph thinks that he's better off inside the Truman Show, because he's safe and comfortable there and it's peaceful there. whereas the world definitely would be chaotic around him, and he would never have a normal life from being the most famous person alive. There's no way you could ever have a simple life, and yeah, it's an interesting way to put it.
Well, think about it. He's beyond famous.
Yeah.
He's like a different level of famous.
Everyone,
like,
was it like 2 billion people watch the show or
but
something?
I mean, you can assume that 6 billion people know of the show, at least everyone who has modern technology. And then you can just imagine, like, yeah, obviously Tom Cruise is probably like the most famous actor alive. And, our presidents are the most famous people. But Truman's on an even different level than that. He's on a stratosphere.
Yeah, he's like a Beatle.
So even more, dude.
Yeah.
So it'd probably be a horrible life, I think. And I think he would go crazy.
He would probably try to escape with Sylvia to go somewhere extremely secluded.
Where can he just have to go to the
Maybe
middle
go
of
to
the
Fiji.
woods? I don't know. Go to Fiji.
Maybe he goes to one of those undiscovered islands in Fiji.
Yeah, so that's why I always
and then
watch
it's Castaway.
Yeah, I watch this movie and I always think this is a sad ending to this person's life.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to look at it.
And I would have totally accepted the ending if they changed it to where Truman chooses his fake reality. I could have seen that ending, the movie ending like that in a way.
That would be such a hopeless ending to not choose freedom.
I know.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you think about like that, what the path he's about to be set on anyways, he'll never have freedom.
Yeah. Well, the film originally was a lot darker than on screen. Nichols' script was originally about Truman, who was like 18, 19 years old, out of like just graduated high school. And it was a lot darker in tone, less comedy. And it was also supposed to be set inside of a fake New York City. So a huge New York City was supposed to be the Truman Show bubble. And Peter Weir had him inject a lot more humor. And then obviously casting Jim Carrey brought a lot of humor as well. And they lightened the tone a lot. So maybe there was a certain ending like that where he did choose the fake reality because it was darker in tone originally.
Yeah, it's almost like in The Matrix when Cypher chooses to go back into the Matrix because he can't handle the real world.
Ignorance is bliss.
And then a year after this film came out, in 1999, Ed TV came out, which is a similar film about a person being filmed 24/7 for reality TV, but
with McConaughey.
But obviously, this is what major studios do. They compete with film ideas, and if one studio, Pixar, comes up with a script called A Bug's Life, then another studio, DreamWorks, is going to copy it and make Ants. So this is kind of like a back and forth thing we see with a lot of studios. And obviously the difference between Ed TV is McConaughey's character, Ed, he chooses the life, he signs up for it, and we're seeing the cameras the whole time. It's an interesting take on it too. It's a really cool movie. I like it.
Yeah, it's actually a decent rom-com. It's pretty good, and it's got Woody Harrelson in it. So I think it's the first movie with McConaughey and Harrelson together,
best buds,
as like the coolest duo ever. They seem like so much fun to hang out with, and it is an interesting take on it. I think they went more for an MTV style of documentary style filmmaking for that, with just the cameramen following them around like a TMZ style. So it's not elaborate and controlled. Like nothing else is nothing about Ed TV is controlled like the Truman Show. It's just filmed. So that's the main difference between those two films. These two movies, Ed TV and Truman Show, they obviously were the precursor to the boom, the gigantic explosion of reality TV on our airwaves. How about we move on to fun facts about the Truman Show?
Let's go.
In an early scene of The Truman Show, a large bottle of vitamin D can be seen on Truman and Meryl's kitchen table. Vitamin D, as many know, is needed for those who without exposure to the real sun, alluding to the fact that Truman has never really been exposed to the real sun, so he needs vitamin D. So he needs vitamin D tablets to stay healthy.
According to a 2008 New York Times article, psychologists in Britain and the United States reported that a number of people experiencing Truman syndrome or the Truman Show delusion, the belief that they are the unwitting star of their own reality TV show. Many afflicted specifically mentioned the film in therapy, and more recently, on September 16, 2013, the detailed account of one Ohio student who suffered for years from the Truman Show delusion was documented in the New Yorker Magazine article Unreality Star by Andrew Morantz.
Would they have ever developed the delusion if they ever never saw the Truman Show?
Probably not, but I'm sure, again, I think people probably believe this in a way, it's paranoia, and there's even
a way to explain, like, if they're suffering from schizophrenia. Yeah, it's a way to explain
extreme anxiety, extreme paranoia, where you're being watched. That's probably been going on forever in terms of modern technology in the 20th century. And then there's even a story, I think, where one person even climbed and broke into the top of the the Statue of Liberty, I think it was, because he thought that he was going to find his high school sweetheart there or something like that, and that would conclude his reality TV show.
That would be like the climax of the show?
Yeah, that'd be the end of the show.
Wow, that's crazy.
It was either that or the Empire State Building.
Wow, that's interesting.
Every street name in Sea Haven refers to a movie actor. Lancaster Square, Barrymore Road, and again, the cast members, all their names relate to actors as well. Merrill, Marlon, Lauren, Kirk, Angela, etc.
The Truman Show has a really iconic poster. It's a rendition of Jim Carrey's face as Truman, made from thousands upon thousands of little tiny stills and photographs. And I mean, it's a famous type of art form that was really popular back then. This type of art was created by Rob Silverman, and he was hired to make the poster for this movie by the studio. And he charged $75,000 for the creation of this poster. So I think it's like the most expensive movie poster ever made.
The location shoot for Sea Haven Island, where the film's fake town in the dome, which was actually right above Hollywood. It's in the valley, right? That's where the dome is. It's right north of the Hollywood sign.
Yeah, it's in Studio City.
It was actually, they filmed in a place called Seaside, Florida, and when director Peter Weir arrived there, with his pre-production team, he said, "Unpack our things. We found our town."
It's perfect. And actually, the two foreign men who are talking in the cafe patio. Remember when Truman is first discovering how weird things are when he skips work and is just watching everyone? There's two. I think they're speaking Italian. I can't tell. Two older men. They're actually the owners of the land of that entire town.
Wow, that's pretty.
So
cool.
They're just cameoing in the movie. The large black diamond on Truman's ring is actually a small hidden camera, and I never noticed it until like repeat viewings of this movie. But it's a really fun little Easter egg of cameras being everywhere. At this point in Jim Carrey's career, he was earning $20 million per role. That was his quota. And for this film, he was so committed to the story itself and wanting to try out dramatic acting. He lowered his salary down to $12 million to make it easier for the production. And the production of The Truman Show was also delayed for a year so that Jim Carrey could star in both The Cable Guy and Liar Liar. The Cable Guy is a very underrated movie.
That movie is hysterical.
Yeah, Ben Stiller made that. We've talked about before how Jim Carrey is such an underrated dramatic actor with regards to how the Academy voters see him. He's never even gotten nominated for an Oscar at all, even though he's had some really remarkable performances in great movies. But the Golden Globes have recognized him multiple times, and Jim Carrey won the Golden Globe for Best Actor in both the drama category and the comedy musical categories. He won for The Truman Show, he won for this, and then he won for The Man on the Moon. He's the only actor to have won Golden Globes in both those categories and never be nominated for an Oscar.
Yeah, I think the Academy, they just have this belief that they don't want to taint their prestigious awards with comedic actors and comedic films. And I think the last comedy that was nominated for an Oscar, I think, was The Artist. And that, I mean, you can say that's a comedy, but it's more...
The Disaster Artist was nominated. That's a comedy.
Okay, yeah, Disaster Artist. Yeah, you can say that's a comedy. All right, maybe I'm wrong.
But you're right. In a way, comedies are shown the least amount of respect from the Academy.
I mean, Bill Murray only has one Oscar nomination, and he's been in some great dramatic films, and he got that nom for Lost in Translation. But I mean, they just, aside from Robin Williams, comedic actors just really don't get any respect in that way from them.
Yeah, hence Adam Sandler. Same thing. It's absurd that Jim Carrey has never been nominated for an Oscar. He should have even gotten nominated as the Riddler, because he is absolutely insane in that movie in a good way.
I mean, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, it's one of the best performances he's ever done in his career. It's so phenomenal, and it blows my mind. You wish, but then, it starts to make you think differently about award shows when stuff like that happens. It's not really fully about the movies that came out that year. There's always a storyline, there's always a narrative, but I think, again, they have a distaste for comedic actors.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, a distaste.
All right, that wraps our episode on The Truman Show. Be sure to go to RaidersOfTheLostPodcast.com, become a member of Patreon, and check out all of our content sources, our merch, our movie posters from movieposters.com. Get your custom one today, and thank you so much for tuning in, everybody.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Thank you for watching Raiders of the Lost Podcast. Hit that subscribe button and notification bell. Listen to the audio format of Raiders of the Lost Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and wherever you listen to podcasts.
New episodes every Monday and Thursday. Support us on Patreon at patreon.com/Raiders of the Lost Podcast.